Could you start just by introducing just who you are?
Sure. My name is Susan Chehardy. I am the Chief Judge of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal. My jurisdiction is Jefferson Parish, St. Charles, St. John, and St. James. I preside over one of the 5 appellate courts in the state of Louisiana. And the appellate court, of course, is the court where you bring a case that's already been tried for review. And so that's what I do. I look at the things that lower courts have already done, and I make decisions about whether or not they were done properly, whether or not they were accurate factually, and then we make written rulings on those particular cases. We don't rule like a trial court does. There's no jury in the box, none of that. So it's just us acting as a body. We sit in panels of 3, different than a trial court. So there's 3 judges who sit at all times and hear every controversy that comes before us.
So do people really understand how an appellate court system works?
No, I think that
everybody thinks trials when they think of courts.
Of course, they think of trials, they think of juries, they think of witnesses on the stand. You think of live testimony, and of course, so many people are familiar, or at least they think they are, with the legal system because they watch a lot of television.
The law and order isn't helping.
Well, it's not that it's hurting, okay? But the problem is that it's funny because when my kids were younger and they used to watch shows like that, they would say, "Why did he do that?" And I would say, "Because that's the way they wrote the script." But in real life, it's not like that.
It's a different animal.
In real life, it's a very different animal. I mean, the rules of the game are very finite in the practice of law and in trial practice. So the way that evidence comes in, the way that witness testimony, it's all part of the rule book. And you have to follow the rule book. The rule book doesn't so much matter in drama, so that's the good news. This is that they have a lot more leeway, but I have yet to see someone, as I saw in Perry Mason many, many times growing up, stand up and say, "I did it, Your Honor."
It doesn't happen.
I'm waiting for that moment. You know, I keep hoping something will occur one day that will be surprising. But so far, it's pretty much the same thing, which is one side has their version of what happened, and the other side has their version of what happened. And depending upon whether or not it's a civil case or a criminal case, the evidence is what makes a difference to the appellate court. We like to look at it as our responsibility to read the record to determine whether or not the trial court, sitting as the trier of fact, it could have been a judge, it could have been a jury of people just like you, whether or not you actually evaluated that evidence properly and applied the law that was given to you. So that's kind of what we do.
So this is a unique position to be in.
Oh yeah, it is.
Because it's very different from trial. It's more review oriented. You're doing these larger analyses. Do you become a bit of a Swiss Army knife as far as a legal practitioner is concerned, because you have to be so familiar with everything?
Well, you do. I mean, you know, it's odd because we were talking about this recently, that the law itself has become an area of smaller specializations. A lot of people who practice domestic only do that. They practice criminal, they only do that. They practice successions, they only do that. They practice maybe corporate law, they only do that.
Wow.
When we get all of those different things, we have to know exactly what's going on in each one of those areas. Because I'm required to evaluate the standard that may be articulated by the law and the case law in that particular area of law. So I do end up being more like a general surgeon as opposed to a specialist. I don't have one area that I'm really, really good at. I'm generally good at a lot of things.
What is it that excites you about this? Because you've been in this position for quite a while.
Oh no, I've been on the appellate court bench for 26 years. Yeah, I know, right?
And how recently have you become
the chief? I've been chief for 5.
For 5.
Yeah, and before that, I was on the appellate court, same appellate court that I'm on now. But I became the chief judge at the retirement of one of the older judges who left, because the chief judge's job is a seniority job. Basically, so I just lasted longer than everybody else, so I get to be the chief. But it's a great job. It's a lot of responsibility because I'm the administrator in addition to the fact that I also do judicial work. So it's a little bit of both. And I like that. I like I'm people oriented, and I really enjoy the administration of the court as well as the legal work that I end up doing, because I haven't given up one for the other. I do both. So, you know, I mean, I can handle it. I mean, you know, it's not like you can't have enough of everything. the administrative work ends up being more than you think it's going to be, but I always have time for the legal work because I really love the legal work.
Yes.
I'm a reader and writer.
Yeah.
So for me, the appellate court was always where I wanted to be. I loved being a trial judge. I was a trial judge for 6 years. It's exciting, it's interesting, but it's the decision-a-minute club. So, people are constantly bringing things to you. You don't have a lot of opportunity for real study.
I see.
The appellate court, on the other hand, is all about the research and the writing. So you get a fact pattern, you get a problem, essentially. Someone has complained about, a decision that was made at the lower court, and it's our job to go through the entire record, to look at everything that came in that case, and make a decision about whether or not the trial court was accurate. So it's a lot of reading, a lot of writing, and a lot of research, because all the law is kind of out there.
Sure.
Now, the creative and interesting thing about what we do, since Louisiana is not traditionally a state that has to follow old case law, even though everybody does,
Sure.
you kind of sometimes get to do something interesting. Take the law in a slightly different direction.
Interesting.
And the law is organic. It is a growing thing. People think of the Constitution as being static. It's not. Everything is subject to interpretation and reinterpretation as it goes forward in time, because we're not standing still. So we do have to periodically look at the framework of the law and decide whether or not it's working for the society that we live in. For instance, you and I were chatting a little while ago about the new media
Sure.
that you see, and that you all are trying to find a way to utilize the new media to the advantage of business. And I think that is an excellent approach. Well, the law is going to have to come up with some rules then.
Oh, it's super
because
interesting. Yeah.
what you're doing right now is going to change the way that the legal universe looks at certain relationships.
Exactly.
And so that is where we get to sometimes exercise a little bit of our creativity and maybe talk about an area of the law that is developing, something that might be in the forefront, that will be able to track the way that the law has already existed.
Set precedents in a sense.
Yeah, for that general area. But then when you get into these specific things, because, the cyber universe is a different place.
Yep.
Where is a contract confected in the cyber universe? Where do you sue somebody if you're having a relationship with them that's online? You can actually contract with someone now who lives in another country.
It's so funny because so much of our work really does exist in this digital ecoverse. We use DocuSign for all of our contracts.
I know.
Service agreements. And something like that 10 years ago would have been unheard of.
Oh my gosh. Well,
People would say,
not only that, but
you
there was a
can't click
total
signature.
vacuum
Yeah.
of legal. The legal area was a total vacuum back then. It would have the framework to allow that sort of an agreement that is, like I said, essentially being confected in space. Not in a place any longer, okay, and not even really by people. It is by extension, but then by the same token, it's also being done through equipment, electronically.
Yes.
So, so that brings another dimension to everything, too. So, these are the types of things the law has to grow into some of this. It's not necessarily all written down and ready for us. And even though the legislature is good at keeping up, it's not always right there on top of what's happening today.
Yes.
And the courts, I think, sometimes have a better and a quicker opportunity to try to fill a little bit of a void in a situation where we're being creative about the way that our relationships are being conducted, how they're supposed to be, how they get put together, and how they get taken apart.
Yes, and I often wonder about that because there's, being in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, you often see that folks are kind of innovating at the edges, and even internally, we've had to do a lot of consideration in terms of just intellectual property generally.
Right.
So intellectual property is one aspect of the law that has really had a difficult time keeping up with the digitalization of everything.
Right, I agree.
So our solution has essentially been to contract rights releases in everything that we do, to say we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the capabilities.
Right.
We, in a certain way, with the way in which we see the industry going, we don't know that defending licensing rights is necessarily the thing that we should be doing.
Right.
So we've made the choice organizationally to say that organizations that contract with us are entitled to full rights for their final products.
Wow.
Like full distribution.
That's very progressive. I think that's an extremely progressive, because most of the time I know in the traditional advertising believe it or
It's all
not,
about licensing.
in a former life, I was in the ad business.
You're
Okay,
kidding me.
now of course, I mean, I've been, when I was in college, I actually worked for a little ad agency in New Orleans, and I was the bookkeeper. But you pick up all this information.
Sure.
Okay, and this is 100 years ago, so I mean, this is literally we were chiseling on a tablet back then. But it was a very different sort of a thing, and the idea of the organization owning its stuff, even things like logo design and stuff like that, that was just coming in to the industry then. The creation of some kind of a thing that was going to represent your company or you, and who owned it. Well, I created it. Do I own it because I created it, or do you own it because you paid for it? And so those things were really starting to blow up big time in, I want to say, like late 70s and the 80s. And that's when I was in the ad game. And then I had a really good friend who was a graphic designer, and she ended up doing a lot of design work.
Had to navigate all that.
Yeah, and had to navigate all of the legality of what happens to this content once you're done with it.
Sure.
And not just sometimes the finished product, but also everything that happens between there and here. Because some people wanted the rights to everything that you did for them. They didn't want anything.
Everything you touched on.
They didn't want everything. It's just they didn't want any loose ends out there, designs or work that they might have looked at that they rejected. So it was always fascinating to see how this was happening, and it appeared to me as though a lot of the contracts and a lot of the written documentation was way behind on where the industry was actually taking their clients. And so I think that you guys y'all are really on a frontier right now, which is fascinating in so many ways. It gives you so much ability to innovate and be creative. And so because the rules are so different, okay, you can push the edge of a lot of different envelopes to come up with something, an idea that's fresh and new and totally unusual, which is what I think you're trying to do. You want to grab people's imagination in a different way. And so, but you have to do that within the bounds of a business relationship.
Yeah.
So once again, back to the lawyers.
Can you tell us about any cases in particular where you've really been operating at the edge of kind of innovation meets the law?
Let's see. I'm trying to think of something. A lot of my stuff is pretty mundane. And part of the reason for that is that state law is not as active in this particular area as federal law is.
Interesting.
Copyright, patent, all of that is federal law.
Sure.
So you have a much broader and a lot more activity in the intellectual property arena and in the cyber universe in general in federal litigation than you're going to have in state law. We just don't have as many areas. In other words, there's, which we were talking about a few minutes ago, licensing rights, copyright, anything like that, that all has to go through the federal government. That basically is something that the federal government does. So your licensing rights are going to be strictly contract between two people.
Sure.
You designed something and somebody else wants to use that image. Well, that's a basic licensing issue, and so that would just be a straightforward contract. That's no matter where that's created or by whom or how. That's probably not going to touch on the intellectual property thing. I think where you get into a lot of wading into a lot of areas where things are really different is certainly in the creation of softwares and in anything that can be used to manipulate, I think, information on the internet for a certain reason by a certain group of people.
And that's getting kicked up to federal. So
yeah, that's pretty much getting kicked up to the federal government at this point.
What's like the quick and dirty distinction between kind of federal versus states? Like
Well, I mean,
what's the funnel that's coming into you?
I mean, okay, so this is like the most 101 thing I can say about that, which is that interstate commerce, okay, is what drives federal law. So, and now, okay, so think about it now. What affects interstate commerce? Like everything. So what doesn't? I mean, it'd be easier to come up with a list of things that don't affect interstate commerce any longer.
Sure.
So what you're talking about is, in other words, if okay, so I get that watch all the way from China.
Okay.
That's through interstate commerce. But when I sell it here on the local level, that's you and me. Mm-hmm. Okay? So the watch may be subject to a whole series of federal laws. That, in other words, the importation of that watch is subject to a whole series of federal laws that are written by Congress, and they're also put into books that you could fill this whole space, literally. But when I sell it to you, that's a local thing.
Transaction.
So locally, if I sell you a defective product, you have to come to me, you have to come at me in state court, is what it is. So most of your transactions that are going to be something that is going to occur between you and another individual, that's going to be local. Anything bigger than that, where you got that camera from, where this building came from, who built it, that could all end up being in federal court, depending upon who it was who built it. If some company that is based in Canada built this building and something is wrong with it, at some point somebody's going to want redress for that. They may have to go to federal court to get it. So the bigger the thing, and the more expansive the concept, the more likely it is that it probably in some way touches interstate commerce, which will draw it straight to the federal system.
So what kinds of themes do you see in South Louisiana in state court specifically?
Well, we live in a chemical environment.
Yeah.
So, we see enough of the injury type suits. We see a substantial amount of that. Okay. But we also see a lot of business litigation now that's coming our way. Companies, that are involved in litigation because either contracts go poorly, relationships go badly, something ends up happening. So it's like I said, you have the beginning, which is documentation that starts a relationship, but then you also have to sometimes take it apart. And so we do both ends of that particular transaction. So, we'll look at a contract that you might have confected with somebody when you were on the front end of the relationship. Now the relationship is ending and not in a good way. And so you have to refer to the court system. Well, we're also going to look at what happened in the beginning, we're looking at what happened in the middle, and then we're going to want to know what happened at the end.
Follow the whole process.
Yeah, so the whole process will impact how you end up getting out of that situation, what you take from that relationship. And the contract is going to control things, of course, because that's the way that business works. But there's also the opportunity sometimes for people's interpretation, for extra information that comes in later. A lot of people make changes to their relationships, business-wise, that weren't anticipated, and those things can often lead to litigation. So, we look at interactions between humans on every scale, all the way down from how parents behave with their children in the juvenile court system, to the way that people interact with the traffic laws in first parish and second parish court, to a major corporation that had an explosion, and there's 1,000 people who are now litigating against that company. Or how about a major corporation that's in the middle of a construction project and something goes wrong?
Yeah.
Okay, well, guess what? They're coming to me. So, so all those different types of relationships, how they get put together and how they get taken apart, that is basically where I stand. Now, we also do criminal. So, we handle everything, all the way down from misdemeanors to felonies,
Smokes.
Yeah, so we do both. All of the courts in Louisiana, except for New Orleans, have a mixed jurisdiction. Okay, so Orleans Parish is the only parish in the state of Louisiana that has a separate criminal court and a separate civil court.
No
all right?
kidding.
Every other parish is a mixed jurisdiction. So all of the parishes that I preside over, their judges handle everything. They handle everything from any kind of misdemeanor, felony, to all this litigation that we talked about.
Yeah.
Anything, domestic, juvenile, they do it all.
And what's
Most
the
definitely.
rationale? What's the pro and con list for having it combined versus separated?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't really completely understand the history of how Orleans Parish's court system got split. I really don't. And it's been like that for a really long time. So it's just never really been something that affected me that much, so I really didn't think that much about it. There was a lot of controversy after Katrina, when the city of New Orleans suffered a reduction in its population, and there was an enormous amount of talk about the possibility of recombining the courts so they'd be like everybody else. Well, that didn't happen because there was a lot of political opposition to it. And so eventually, though, the city began to repopulate, and so I think that the systems now have plenty enough to do with their time, sadly. But all the other areas of the state of Louisiana, you have to think of them, a lot of them were rural. Or they had a much smaller population, so having 2 or 3 judges, even still in places in North Louisiana, in some places in the western part of the state that are less populous, you actually have judges that still ride the circuit. So they may travel from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, They may have 3 ride the circuit.
I've heard it a couple of times, and I think I know what it refers to.
Yeah, what it is the judge, his jurisdiction may encompass several parishes, but he will literally go from parish to parish to hear cases in that locale. As opposed to having people come to him, he'll go to them.
Like
And so that's exactly right. So we still have judges who ride the circuit even in Louisiana because so much of Louisiana is agrarian. It's still farmland. I mean, people are, one of the principal things that we do here, we still grow things. Like I said, we extract oil out of the ground. We have a lot of natural gas, a lot of chemical production. But that's all in the South. In the North, all they do is grow things. I mean, so you can go for days, and see fields and farmland. And of course, we have our share of sugarcane and rice down here, but by the same token, so it just depends. And because the population was so dispersed in this agrarian area, you had judges you might just have 2 judges who were handling 5 parishes, but they might only have in all 5 parishes maybe less than 10,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's really why it wouldn't make sense. So if you look at the way the map is split up, Louisiana has 64 parishes, but we only have, I think, 40. I'm probably going to get this wrong. Please don't hold me to this. I think we only have 43 or 44 judicial districts.
Okay.
So some of it, I guess I should have looked that up before. I could Google that before I came, right? But I didn't. So anyway, and then we have from that 5 appellate courts, and then eventually 1 Supreme Court.
Well, it's fascinating hearing the way you describe it, because you're really presiding over one of the largest ones in the state.
Yes, as far as population goes.
Sure.
Yeah, the greater Jefferson Parish area. We have a lot of people now in Jefferson Parish, probably a little over, I want to say 600,000 in Jefferson Parish alone. Okay. And then when you go up the river to St. Charles Parish, St. John Parish, St. James Parish, since the storm, they have enjoyed an increase in their population and wealth. Really? So the whole area has kind of grown up. Yeah, it's gotten pretty big.
It's almost nearly 1 million people.
Well, probably close to 750,000, I would think, if you added them all up.
Yeah, that's almost 20% of the state of Louisiana.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant amount of the population. It really is. And then when you add it to the greater New Orleans area, of course, we're well over 1 million, I would think, at this point in time, because Orleans Parish, the 4th Circuit, is Orleans Parish, St. Bernard, and Plaquemine. Now, they are still suffering from a little bit of a population lag. They haven't necessarily regained as much population as they lost after Katrina, because they had so much devastation in their parishes. They really got crushed.
Do you think there were things that happened in the legal front that made recovery after Katrina a little bit easier in certain parishes?
Well, I can tell you right now that I know that, my brother was the assessor of Jefferson Parish at the time. Mm-hmm. So he was working very closely with the legislature to try to see what they could do to help homeowners, because here you had people who had legitimately lost everything.
Yes.
And all of a sudden the tax bill comes due on a house that may
not be there anymore.
Is destroyed, right, or may not be there any longer. So they jumped on it right away and started looking at things from that point of view. Now, as far as the legal what we did, in other words, our responses to that was that we were just trying to keep up with everything that was happening especially on the criminal end, because there was a certain amount of looting that went on, and there was a lot of trouble, and nobody wants to encourage anybody to do anything like that. So, the legislature jumped on that. They immediately enacted a series of statutes that were pretty harsh. Wow. As far as penalties go and stuff like that. Well, in the average theft situation, you might be talking about, 0 to 5 and probation in most cases. Yeah. For looting, at one point, I know that it might have been a minimum at one stage, but I know that people were getting 15 and 20 years.
And was this was really a legal response to say, just don't do it?
That's exactly
don't
right.
Do it.
It was the ultimate deterrent, was to basically tell people who were even maybe in a first offender situation that they were not going to be able to get away with this, that this was not going to be tolerated, because it was the most predatory type of behavior, I think, that we had seen in a while. And so the legal profession was appalled by the idea that during a massive evacuation as a result of a natural disaster, people are going to be breaking into your house and stealing your stuff.
All the things,
Really?
You were worried about getting your family out.
Yeah, you got to be kidding me. We're just worried about trying to get the city back up and running,
Sure.
and the parish back up and running. Everybody was focused on the idea of bringing everyone's quality of life back. Mm-hmm. That was more. You don't want to have to worry about whether or not someone's stealing the TV out of your living room. That was impossible. And also the same thing with merchants and everything like that, because people who had the opportunity to come back were being helpful. People who came back and opened stores, and especially in the outlying areas where the devastation wasn't quite as bad, they were coming to try to be helpful. Well, the idea that we were going to leave them on their own and not protect them, I think that this would have been more than the governmental area could have been able to handle. So we were trying to do everything that we could to make sure that they were also, knowing that nothing was going to be tolerated with regard to allowing them to be preyed on by anybody under those circumstances. So I mean, the police, the National Guard, the military, everybody was on high alert, and everybody worked so well together. It was really amazing to see it, because that's the coordination of a lot of activity, but it really went well. It worked really, really well in the city of, and I think that all of our leaders pulled themselves together in a way I think that people were kind of surprised about, because we're a little insular here. So we're not good at asking for help. We really aren't. But that was one of those situations where we needed it. And I think the response that we got was pretty positive. The immediate aftermath of the storm is going to go down in history as something that, we needed a better plan. We needed a better plan. But we have a better plan now. So that's the good news. So hopefully we'll never have the same thing occur again, because, we have a coup plan, which is the continuation of operations.
Okay.
The legal profession has the continuation of operations, so that we have a plan in place now in the event of a massive evacuation. We have to go somewhere else, and we just start up again. And what my particular group did in order to ensure that the legal system would not have any downtime is that I am now 100% electronic. All of my records, everything.
Was this a big move? Was this
yeah, it cost a lot of money, and it was a big move. It did. It was not inexpensive to do it, but it felt so necessary in the wake of the storm, because even though our immediate physical area was not damaged, we had a little damage to our building, and the power came back up relatively quickly where we are in Gretna. Okay, Gretna is it's a slightly different area. They have their own water system, their own, everything is local. So they were up and running after about 2 or 3 weeks, and they got their power back on. So the building could have been habitable, except for the fact that all of our employees were scattered to the four winds.
Oh, goodness.
And it was so hard to get in touch with everybody. That was the first problem that we faced, was how to communicate with our group, because we didn't really have a mass email system back then. This is 2005. So it doesn't seem like that long ago. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, gee whiz, I've had email since, 1995, which is true, but it wasn't being done on an organizational scale back then. No courts were actually communicating that way back then. So I sat with the chief, who was the chief at the time, and told him this is something that I feel is critical at this point. What if this building had been demolished? What if a tornado had hit it? What if something had happened that made it impossible for us to come back to this facility? What would we do? And so we really needed to come up with a creative way in order to allow the system to continue to function. And going into the cyber universe seemed like the most natural approach. And we were at the stage, we had created a case management system, a database that's specific to what we do, that compiles and allows the use of our information in a very particular kind of way. So I really thought that we could grow that into a system where everything could be electronic. Our records, our filings, everything.
Well, it saves money in the long run. It's expensive to get it set up, but the efficiencies that you get from it.
It's unbelievable. In other words, we are almost paperless at this point. So even just from not having to store boxes and boxes of paper any longer, all of that, everything has been digitized, even all the way back to the beginning. We've put everything online now. So all of our opinions, most of our writs, everything, all the way back to the beginning of our court, which is 1982 is when my court was created. It's all in the computer now. So it works out great. And I have e-filing. So even if you're in Canada and you need to file something, you're not going to have any trouble doing it. All you have to do is just go online, and you can e-file with me through my portal. And all of my records are electronic now, so they're all downloaded into the computer. I can either send you a link if you want to see a record.
Yeah.
Or I can burn a disc and mail it to you if you want it to have it to go
Still
someplace
have to
else.
burn discs?
Yeah,
They don't let you use jump drives?
No. I'll tell you, the weird thing about it is that this is coming from the lawyers, is the disc. I know, right? You'd think that they would be on the jump drive thing, but we have kind of like, some lawyers are still using equipment that dictates that they get their record on a disc.
Yeah.
So, but we can send you, but I can also send you a link if I have to. In other words,
Sure.
I don't even have to send you a physical
Anything physical.
thing. I can actually shoot you a link of that whole record, and you can download it there if you want to. So we're upgrading our shopping cart. Now we have a shopping cart. I mean, I know all this terminology. I never knew before. It's been kind of cool.
Yeah.
It really has been, because it's given us a whole nother dimension, basically, and it's given us a lot of freedom. And as far as our communication ability goes, we have group text, emails, everything. So if tomorrow somebody said you have to evacuate the building and you can't go back for a month, I could still hold court. Everything would still flow into a server that I would have access to, and I also have another server in Shreveport. So I have a backup system that's it's the mirror of the system that I have here.
Oh, wow.
And I can switch over if I have to use that system, and it backs up in real time. So everything that's being done at the court right now as we speak, are they still working? Yeah, they're just about ready to leave. Everything that's being done right now is backing up to Shreveport. So if I had, in other words, if the building blew up, and I could switch over to my remote system, and it would be almost identical to the system that I have locally.
Wow.
So there wouldn't be any downtime for the court. It would just keep running.
So looking at innovation, a lot of public services often take the rap for being archaic, bureaucratic, difficult to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
What particularly in your ecosystem do you see as being most necessary to create innovation around?
Well, from my perspective, I think while I think that electronic communication is extremely beneficial, I do believe that there's still a place, especially in the legal field and in the practice of law and in the courts especially, for human interaction. So what we're starting to experiment with and see and think about and look at is the idea of maybe video conferencing. Sometimes a lawyer can't make it in for oral argument or something like that. And so instead of pushing the case off, which means it has to go for a whole other month before it can get to the to the next docket to be heard.
No kidding. So there's a month if you...
Oh yeah, no. I mean, our dockets are set up way in advance. So it's not like, in other words, I know what 10 cases I'm going to hear in a week.
Yeah.
I knew that 2 months ago. So I can't just slip one in there because it's all set up.
Sure.
So it's arranged, on a schedule and everything like that. So it's hard to throw one in, just like it's hard to pull one out. Because then where am I going to put it? It's got to go to...
It's thrown way down the road.
It could get thrown way down the road. We fixed that problem because I came up with a special setting system where if I've got a case that has to get pulled off of a docket, I can usually put it back onto a special docket that's going to come up within a month. So I know it doesn't have to languish for 3 months to get on a new docket. So, we've worked through all of that to try to figure out ways to make sure that we're moving our caseload as rapidly as we can.
Yeah.
At the same time, while we're trying to assist the lawyers when they have some problem that they're trying to resolve that they can't, that requires them to have to bump oral argument for some reason.
Is it,
It happens, sometimes people get sick, sometimes people, we set the docket and then we send it to you.
Sure.
You may look at your calendar and say, my daughter's getting married in Tahiti that day, and I can't. And I've had that happen.
No kidding.
Oh, yeah, no, seriously. I had a lawyer contact us and say, look, my daughter's getting married in Mexico that day. Can I check?
Please.
Yes, you can. Okay, yeah, that's a legitimately good reason
That's it.
why you're not going to be an oral argument. So, yeah, we will make accommodations for people who have, good reason to bump off oral argument. Because like I said, I don't consult with them when I set my schedule. I set my schedule and then I send it out. And so then we do try to be a little more flexible, especially if they let us know way in advance. We can usually assist and come up with alternate times. But as far as what I don't want to see the legal profession become is a bunch of heads in a box. In other words, that we lose this.
Yeah.
You and I legitimately right now could be video conferencing with each other.
Sure.
But it wouldn't be the same.
Very little fun.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the same thing,
We'd have to
right?
ship you a LaCroix before we
Well,
started.
and that would be the first problem. But beyond that, I think that the energy and the interaction that you get from the other people in the room
Yeah.
makes an enormous difference. And when you're trying to communicate something important, I think when you're looking at someone and you're making a point to them, I think it means a lot.
Sure.
To be able to be in the same physical space with those people. I like it. And I don't want to see the legal profession become something where we're all literally just staring at each other on a video screen. I think I think we would lose something in what we do, even just us, because I don't see witnesses, I don't take evidence. I look at a record, I look at a cold record, I already do that. But having the lawyers there to communicate with can be extremely helpful.
Because they're a point of translation in a lot of ways.
Well,
They
not only
help
that,
guide
but
you through-
a lot of times when you're reviewing something that a lawyer has sent you, a brief, he's only focusing on a few different things.
Sure.
But you're looking at the whole record, so you're seeing the entire picture. And you may have questions about how that related to this or this related to this, even though they may not have highlighted that or brought it up. So a lot of times in trying to get a full feeling for, okay, why did you introduce these documents, which you didn't bother to mention it? You know, I mean, so you can ask a series of questions that the record can't answer.
Yeah.
But the lawyer can, and so that is very helpful. Can be very helpful to flesh out something that you're trying to understand from a case that he knows backwards and forwards. You've
Sometimes
had the
it's hard
opportunity.
to get it out of your head if you've been staring at it for too long.
Well, and not only that, but I mean, I'm reading the record in a linear way, so I'm just looking at this from witness number one to the end of the trial. Okay, I'm looking at it very linear. He's got a much more organic feel for how this all happened. Oh yeah, well, we got this because of this, or we saw this because, I had to ask for this in discovery, and this is how. So they have a much more, they have a broader appreciation for when this information came to their attention and why it might have made its way into the record at that particular point. And so sometimes that can be helpful to us too, because like I said, it can put a little flesh on the bones that the record actually provides you, and that can help you when you're really trying to understand what really went on, not just what you're saying went on or what you told me is wrong. I want to look at the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because that's really what I'm there to do. Well, that's why, think about it. We don't actually remove a human heart and then let the surgeon operate on it. He's operating on a whole body.
Yeah.
Well, we do the same thing. I want to look at the entire body. I want to see it all when I'm trying to figure out what's wrong and what went wrong. And so that interaction can help me to understand things that I may not be able to comprehend just reading the record or looking at a brief.
Have you always seen yourself in public service?
Pretty much.
Pretty much?
Yeah, pretty much. It's a real family thing with my family.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is.
You mentioned that your dad is pretty deeply involved, was pretty deeply
Yeah,
involved.
my dad was the assessor of Jefferson Parish. And then my dad was the assessor for 13 years. Then my brother became the assessor. He was assessor for 35 years. And then after my dad retired from that job, he eventually got elected to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. So he was an appellate court judge.
Okay.
Yeah. And then within a few years, the Fourth split and became the Fourth and the Fifth. And that's how the courts in Jefferson Parish came into being. So I had just started law school when my dad, when they formed the Fifth. So my dad formed the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal, the legislature, because two things were happening at one time. Back in the day, before 1979, the Supreme Court of the state of Louisiana heard every criminal appeal that came from every court in the state. Appellate courts did not have criminal jurisdiction.
Wow.
So
That must have
it
been
was
incredibly bogged down.
it was an enormous amount of work, and especially as you drew from the 60s into the 70s and then into the late 70s, the criminal cases in Orleans Parish started to explode, and in Jefferson as well. Well, the population in Jefferson was growing, is what was happening, and so of course along with people comes crime. I mean, that's just one of those things.
Yeah.
And so you had all of a sudden all of this, this explosion of population, people moving, and then crime was coming right along with it. And then also the things that were happening socially that were changing the landscape. Drugs were changing the landscape. They didn't exist in the 50s. So, you have this entire other problem that the society is trying to regulate. And it's very hard to regulate. I think that, now we can look at it, as a longitudinal thing and say, wow, I don't know what we could have done differently at the beginning, but we didn't do a very good job.
No kidding.
Because we really seem to be struggling still with controlling how to keep people safe, inside the landscape of contraband substances.
Yeah, in a sense, it's funny to hear you articulate it in this way, to describe it as something that the legal system is playing catch up with in a lot of senses. But it goes over the heads of everyone in my generation, as this sort of thing where, we went through DARE programs in middle school or high school. And now we're on the cusp of folks that are pushing all this sort of state legalization for certain substances.
Right.
You have the explosion of other like hemp-based substances. You have people that are making all these federal pushes towards decriminalization.
This is the Wild Wild West for us, because this is going to usher in my opinion, a complete revolution at some point in the way that we look at how we control human behavior on a certain level.
Sure.
Because I do believe that we have focused so much on the question of trying to stop people from selling or distributing things we think and believe are dangerous.
Yeah.
And I think at some point we have to switch to a more treatment-based option, because what we're ending up doing is putting a lot of people who are addicted in jail.
Yeah.
And that's really not working.
Turning your jails into rehab centers.
Yeah, which is not really working for us at all as a society. So, I think we need to re-examine the whole problem at this point. And even though I'm not a huge fan of decriminalization, I'm not going to lie, I'm just going to tell you I'm not. I'm going to do whatever the law instructs me to do, though, because that is the oath that I took, was to uphold the laws of the state of Louisiana, the Constitution of the state of Louisiana, and the Constitution of the United States. And that is what I'm going to do. What they say, what the expression of the legislature is what I end up looking at.
Sure.
But if we are going in that direction, in other words, if we're moving in the direction of trying to change the way we have been approaching this for the last 35 years, we haven't done a great job. We really haven't. The opioid crisis is bigger than ever, and the number of deaths associated with that are staggering. And honestly, I have a really good friend who represents the Coroners Association in the state of Louisiana, and we talk about this all the time. It's unbelievable. It is killing. It is causing so much pressure to be put on the coroners, because you all of a sudden have this entire medical crisis that's going on outside of the normal hospital type of a situation.
Yeah.
Well, they're the ones who are having to respond to it. They're not used to the volume that they're having to deal with. Normally the coroner's dealing with deaths, natural or unnatural. This is just at a scale that is unprecedented.
It is really interesting to see that and to hear the way you talk about it, is because it does feel like the pendulum just wants to swing so aggressively, right?
Right.
You take all of the really aggressive just say no sort of campaigning that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And you couple it with what's now the Wild West
right.
of
this decriminalization thing. So this looks like the perfect storm to me. And the way that I see it coming together, I'm a little concerned, because I don't actually know how these two things are going to meet.
Sure.
Because right now, they're not doing a very good job of getting on the same page with one another. In other words, the states that have decriminalized it, they just pulled the plug. And they were just like, okay, well, yesterday it was a felony. Hey, today you can buy it at the 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
It's just, and for me, that's kind of mind-boggling. And so I worry, because it seems like a big experiment. In other words, maybe the other way was a big experiment too. Let's just stop everybody from trying to do this, which, like I said, clearly we haven't done a great job. But on the back end, the idea of, okay, well, now we're just gonna let it out there. We're just gonna we're gonna throw it off the floats. Okay.
There are these unknowns, right?
Yes.
You take this. There's this big company that does nicotine vaporizers called Juul. Juul.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was reading an article about how it's become high schoolers' drug of choice.
Come on, man. This
and
wasn't.
So
was this the intention?
Well, this is the thing. It's also a multi-billion-dollar company that has
Right.
gone through multiple rounds of fundraising. It's
yeah.
VC-backed. It's exploding.
Right.
And the major users are folks who
I know.
and they're pushing the marketing to say, and this is maybe my sort of
No.
tinfoil hat.
That's okay.
Wearing side of things, but you see these giant full-page advertisements saying, right across the top, this product contains nicotine and should not be used for children. And the whole marketing campaign is about how it's helping people transition from cigarettes, which is fantastic, right?
Right.
It's admirable. You get
Right.
the tar out of your lungs. It's
Right.
a reduction strategy. That's awesome. But then every other concurrent story says,
Right. By the
hey,
way,
45, 50% of high schoolers, and I'm making this up, so don't quote
no,
me,
I know.
but a large percentage of high schoolers are
Right.
drooling.
Right.
They're sucking on these nicotine pens,
Right.
like they're lollipops. You know?
I know.
So it is really interesting.
Well,
to
and
see
I do
what
think
happens.
that, in other words, all of a sudden, what happened was somebody said the words, "This is less dangerous," and so all of a sudden that gets translated to "This isn't dangerous."
Send it.
No, yeah, it's still dangerous. Okay, don't do it. I mean, it's still, and the dangerous part is the part about it, all this being addictive.
Yeah.
It'd be great if the Juul pen didn't contain nicotine, which is still an addictive substance.
Sure.
So that's kind of really where I part ways with whether or not marketing something that's healthier that contains an addictive substance is really marketing something healthier at all.
Sure. You've created a different kind of.
Yeah, that's all. Just a
kind of
different kind of dependency. So maybe it's not going to kill you this way, but it's still going to hurt you probably in the long run. And once again, interesting experiment. We have no idea. There's no longitudinal
There's
study
no precedent, yeah.
on what happens to you if you vape nicotine for 40 years.
Sure.
I mean, you could end up with a worse disease than the people who have been smoking cigarettes all of these years. We don't know. And so we keep throwing this stuff out into the marketplace and pretending like it's not really a problem because it doesn't cause that bad thing to happen.
Sure.
But what about these other 5 bad things that maybe it's going to go? We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So since we don't know, then it gives the manufacturer the opportunity to say something along the lines of, well, there's no proven negative.
Just because it's so new, there's no. Yeah.
Right. But then the kids get a hold of it, and oh my God, then it all goes to hell. I mean, so.
We're screwing up everything.
No, it's not that, but it's just that everything is so available to y'all now.
Yes.
Y'all are in a different. I mean, we literally, when I was growing up, okay, if we wanted to get our hands on something, we either had to steal it from our parents or we had to go find the one store in the entire greater New Orleans area that would sell beer to a 16-year-old, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was hard to obtain the things that we wanted to do when we were kids that we shouldn't have been doing, making it much more difficult for us to do them. You guys can order stuff online now, okay?
Sure.
I mean, I've read enough about sites like the Silk Road and places where you can actually
illegal markets
buy,
and-
in the dark web where you can actually buy really seriously illegal drugs.
Yeah.
And it's all out. It's real. I mean, it's
FedEx it to your door.
I know, which blows your mind. I mean, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, I think that parents have become so desensitized to the idea that their kids are getting stuff in the mail that they don't even know what it is.
Wow.
If I had gotten something in the mail, my mother would have been like, "What is that?"
Would have
And
opened it,
yeah,
yeah,
she
put
would have
your
opened
counter.
it and they would have examined it, and there wouldn't have been any opportunity for me to just walk in, pick up the Amazon bag and keep going. I mean,
Yeah.
my mom would have been like, stop, where are you going? What is that? Where did it come from? And how did you pay for it? I mean, there would have been a million questions. Not anymore.
How do you balance that? How do you balance all of this
Okay.
cultural acceleration with the principled interpretation of the law?
Well, I mean,
Because that's only getting harder, it seems.
it is getting harder, but the point of it is this: is that once again, I mean, the law is always slow to react. It really is. Okay, it's not. It does not. This is not a blink of an eye type of a thing at all. I mean, we wait for the really bad stuff to start happening, and then we wake up and it's like, oh yeah, no, we need to do this or change this or fix this.
Sure.
So it is slow. It is not super responsive, unfortunately. But I think what the law has tried to do inside of this gap between, okay, this is happening, it's part of the legal system, but it's also part of another problem, is that we've tried to create specialty entities that kind of buffer individuals who, while they've been caught in the criminal justice system because of the nature of what they're doing, they don't actually belong there. So drug courts, mental health courts, we have a lot of services that flow through the juvenile system.
Like diversion programs?
Diversion programs through the district attorney's office so that you don't necessarily have to end up with a criminal record, which
Sure.
is very damaging still to this
Sure.
day. It's a hard thing to have a felony record when you're 18 or 19 years old. So those types of things, the legal system has tried to innovate, to try to come up with an approach in which we can continue to monitor and have some hammer over somebody who's doing something that's technically illegal, okay? That you broke the law, so you have to respond to it. But then when you actually see the human in front of you and you realize that you're dealing with someone who is addicted to a substance, and that addiction goes beyond anything that they can actually control on their own. If they don't get some kind of help to do it, it's not going to happen for them. And many of them don't want to be caught in the cycle of addiction either. They would love to be able to get out of it because of this very problem. They keep getting snared into the system, which basically keeps them on the same hamster wheel.
Sure.
Because you get a felony arrest for possession, of a small amount of narcotics, a rock, a crack, or something like that. Maybe you get that one expunged. The next one, not so much. So now you have a felony, a permanent felony. Where do you go to work now? And so what do you do? And so that kind of ends up feeding back on itself. And so what do you end up doing? You end up turning back to the drugs. Maybe you start selling them because you don't have any other alternatives. That part of your life where you were going in this direction now turns you in this direction.
Yeah.
So I think that the judicial system has tried to recognize that we're dealing with different individuals inside the same problem, and that there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all solution to this particular thing. And so the mental health courts, we have veterans courts, we have drug courts. All of these things are designed to try to figure out, what is your base problem? What are we really dealing with here? Are you a veteran who's still suffering from some sort of PTSD that's never been treated, or you've never received any assistance, so you're self-medicating in order to, and you're using illegal substances to do it? Or maybe you're just using alcohol and you're driving while you're doing it. Anything along that spectrum, okay? So we want to look at you as a person and say, okay, let's try to figure out what the underlying problem is here, and let's try to work with that a little bit and see if maybe we can't get you with services and in a situation in which you can get help so that you won't have to remain attached to the criminal justice system. Because we really prefer you not to be here.
Yeah.
We don't want you in jail. You don't belong there. You're not violent. You're not aggressive. You're not a predator. Those people, the people who are preying on other people, we can't fix them necessarily.
Sure.
Sometimes you can. Most of the time you can't. So the predators, they're going to have to end up dealing with the justice system for whatever it is that they did.
In a more direct
Yeah.
way.
I don't think there's anything we can do for them.
How often is it the case that you see this? It makes me think of the psychological term comorbidity, right? The idea that two things occur together.
Yeah.
You have depression, but you're also bipolar or something like that.
Right. We see it a lot.
How often are folks coming through the court system where, and I'm sure you see it all the time in a lot of these criminal cases, where there's just two or three things that you go, damn, like if this person had this underlying thing that was dealt with,
that's right.
This wouldn't have become this, which wouldn't have become this, which means that we're kind of screwed when we get here. Right. Because by the time we're here, there's already 5 or 6 things that have happened that have really changed the way that you.
And if you're getting all the way to me, you're in trouble. You've been in the system for a while. Yeah. If you're getting all the way to me, if you're getting all the way to the appellate court level, because there is so much intervention that can take place with a first or second or even third felony offender in a non-violent. Violence, no, violent, you can't. Violence has to go to a totally separate section. That's not what we're talking about. But we're talking about things like theft and stuff like that. And most of the time, what you're dealing with is someone who has some sort of underlying issue. They're either mentally ill or, like I said, they got caught up in the justice system at some point and they could never get away from it. In other words, the stigma of having a felony record on your, a felony arrest on your record never leaves them. Yeah. So they're confined to a certain category of work, of where they live, of who they associate with. Their entire life can all of a sudden change and go in a whole different direction just because they got caught up in something that might have happened as a result of pick something. I was too young and too stupid to know better.
17-year-old.
Yeah,
Which we all were at one time.
Yeah, we were, is the problem. And so, like I said, that's really where I think the justice system is trying to, and that's why things like diversion, DA diversion, and then the specialty courts programs can actually maybe reach in and save people who are not going down the road of violence and predatory behavior. If you can pull them away from anything like that and turn them this way, sometimes we have the ability to do it. Sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
The person has to want to, you got to want to change.
Yeah.
You really do. What is the old joke? How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but the light bulb has to really want to change.
Exactly.
So, I mean, that's really, the person has to want to be a part of what we're offering, okay? And some people don't. Some people don't. They're not interested. So, but we're trying to come up with innovations, techniques, programs that are designed to reach into the criminal justice system and try to extract the people who will not benefit by jail at all.
Sure.
Prison will not help them. If anything, it may actually do much worse. I mean, it'll harm them. And so those people, if we can get them out and put them over here with counselors and group therapy and maybe jobs skills training, and we're actually, I mean, I had a lady, I was at a restaurant that I will not name, and a woman, I was sitting there with a group of other judges and we were having lunch, and she came over and she was gushing over the fact that she was a drug court graduate. And she told us all, she said, y'all saved my life.
Wow. How'd she recognize you?
Well, one of the judges, it was one of the drug court. Judge. Yeah, he was one of the presiding judges over the drug court. And she was so genuine. She had no fear of telling us that she had a history. But she also wanted us to understand that without what they had done for her, her life would have been over. Mm-hmm. She would have lost her daughter. I mean, there's a million different things that, so many problems that flow from getting drawn into the system. And this woman was just, I mean, she couldn't have been nicer, and she couldn't have been more grateful and more appreciative. And she said, y'all changed everything for me, and I can't ever thank y'all enough. And it's like, okay, this makes it totally worth it. I mean, really, when you meet someone who has
so positively touched.
Right, who has had their life, I mean, something about the way you interacted with them that only happened to me one time.
Yeah.
I was getting my car washed, and the guy who was vacuuming the car came over to me and he said, "You're Judge Chehardy, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." And I always want to duck, 'cause it's like, is there a left hook coming behind that? And he said, "I came before you in a criminal case. You were very nice to me." He said, "And you told me that you really wanted me to have another chance." He said, "And so I want you to know that I've taken advantage of that, and I have not committed another crime." He said, "I work, 12 hours a day here." He said, "Then I go to another job. He said, "Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to not go to prison." And I was like, "Well, you're welcome." I said, and I'm glad that you actually, decided that you wanted to change your life. Because he had to walk out of that courtroom and take advantage of the chance that I gave him.
Yeah.
That was his part.
Oh, that was a bullet dodge.
Right, that's exactly right. Okay, let me see if I can go out and get away with something worse. Because, we also have that reaction, unfortunately, that, people sometimes who are not treated harshly believe that they got away with it. No, that's not really it. Okay, we're actually trying to give you an opportunity to get your life together, but since I can't follow you out and make sure you do, you have to be the person who affects that change in your environment. That particular guy did it, and he got out of it. So he'll probably live a long and happy life, and that'll be a different thing for him than where he was headed. Yeah. Because it just escalates, and prison is not a good way to end. It just isn't. It's a terrible way to end. And it always pains me when I see sometimes how young some of these people are, and we have to incarcerate them for lengthy periods of time because of what they've done.
Yeah.
I mean, it really breaks my heart, because you see all that potential and it's just circling the drain. And that's it. It's over now. Anything you could have done, any part of the world you could have made better, that has been foreclosed forever. Because everybody does have the opportunity to make the world around them better. They really do. You have that chance. It's not a question. We don't live in countries where they can force you into service. Yeah. And that's why when people, don't always appreciate what freedom actually means. That's what it means. That we don't live in a place where all of a sudden somebody can come pull you out of your house and make you go be in an army somewhere like they can in other countries. I mean, we don't have that here. So you actually have the chance. We offer you public education. We offer you, and sometimes it's not great, but it gives you the opportunity to be exposed to something that you can take and build into something else in your life. So those are the opportunities you have to be able to take advantage of. They're there for you. Don't look the other way because you think maybe this immediate life might be better for me because look, I mean, I can make money right now. Yeah, it has its limitations, and it's only going to operate for you for a period of time. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, boop, you're going to get swept up into a system, and then all the potential that you might have had is lost, every bit of it. And I can't, it kills me to see it. It really does. It's so hard to know that individuals could have gone a different way, and they just didn't.
It's interesting that you frame it in the context of freedoms, which I think is a really powerful way to articulate it because
But it is.
I often feel that folks, younger folks, kind of take it for granted. We're a little bit spoiled by what we've got, and oftentimes focus too much on the negatives that exist within our existing structures. Understanding that those things are entirely legitimate and do exist, but it's a bit of a don't throw the baby out with the bathwater situation where no, there's still a lot of really, really incredible gifts that have grown out of our country from its inception. And not without flaw, but it's
every
really about
system. Every system needs a tune-up. Okay, every system needs a tune-up every once in a while. Yeah. But the good news about our system is that you don't have to start from scratch every time.
Yes.
I mean, so much of the fundamentals of what make this country the way that it is allow for an enormous amount of expression. We have a heck of a range that you can go to. I mean, I just look at artistic expression, okay? I mean, it's all over the place. And we encourage it. We support it. You know, we have endowments and we have foundations and we have funds that actually try to draw as much creativity out of individuals as they can find. And so, I mean, this doesn't always exist in other places. You don't have this kind of support that you can look toward if you want to start creating something new and different. Here we do. And it's not just about making money, because, I mean, a lot of people I know disparage capitalism as a system in which all it's about is the profit. I don't really think that that's accurate. I think your generation is a lot more concerned with the overall effect of what you're going to be doing. I mean, it's not that you guys don't want to make money, because everybody has to survive. But that doesn't seem to be the end-all, be-all for your group. Your group seems to be a lot more, and I see this in my kids, and I appreciate what I'm watching, a lot more about, okay, so I want to start a business, but I want to make sure that it's got an impact that is going to be positive for the immediate environment around it. You know, people who were starting businesses back in the day when I was, I mean, they weren't necessarily concerned with the impact. Is this going to affect the greater good in any way? They were just about, okay, this is my business and I'm just going to do it, whatever it is. But this is a much more, it seems like it's a much more global approach.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
To a lot of things. And I do believe that that is a good thing, okay? Inclusion, the idea of having a more expansive appreciation of the fact that tolerance is a good thing. It doesn't mean that we don't have any rules. What it means is that the rules that we have are there to try to keep us all on the right track, safe, and basically give us all this a level playing field and an environment that we can all function in, okay? Where you don't have to worry about getting hurt, you don't have to worry about getting mugged or, beat up or anything. I mean, that's the stuff that you want to avoid, right? Yeah. But where you're in a place where you can come up with these ideas that actually can benefit a much wider audience and a much bigger group. I mean, you have this great platform, and so you can go out and use your ideas and try to spread the word that you think is a much more important way for people to start looking at things. I told my daughter this, my youngest daughter, who is Mia's roommate, that I keep telling her this, that y'all are the future. Okay? You really are. Y'all are the future. And what y'all need to do is take what we did, because it wasn't bad, and make it better. Because that's what we did. Okay? I mean, I was raised by Depression-era parents, and so they had a very different perspective on a lot of things.
Very sort of survival.
Yeah. I mean, very deprivation-minded,
Through depression, World War
Right.
II.
Yeah. A whole different outlook.
Handle yours and don't peek your head
Whole different outlook, okay? Yeah. And then you come to my group, which is been a lot more expansive because all of a sudden the world got small. Yeah. You know, I mean, you can reach out to talk to somebody in any country that you want to. I mean, Lydia's in Barcelona. I could text her right now, and she texts me right back. So it's not like you're ever out of touch with anybody, anywhere anymore. So you look at the way that social media and the way that the cyber universe is already changing the world in some ways. I mean, look at what happened in Egypt. You know, you had all these young people, okay, using their social media to try to get the message out, to talk about revolution in a way that was going to change their society for the better. I think that can happen here too. I mean, you know, that everybody needs to recognize that this is an unprecedented communication tool. Yeah. And the idea that you're using it in a positive way. So what that means is you take the structure of what's already here and you just improve on it. Yeah. You can't take it apart.
You tune it up.
Yeah, you got to tune it up. I mean, you can't take it apart because you can't start from nothing. Okay, we're too big. Too much going on here. We can't just dismantle it and rebuild it. That's not going to work. So you do have to look at it and see, okay, well, maybe this needs to be fixed and this needs to be tweaked and we need to do something over here. But by and large, the system is pretty okay. Sure. And that's where I think, you know, you can't overwhelm yourself with the idea that it's all so bad it all has to go. It doesn't all have to go. A lot of the structure is fundamentally workable. Maybe it's being utilized sometimes in a way that it wasn't intended to be utilized. That happens all the time. But the good news is that you can express yourself when it's time for you to go vote.
Yeah, it's a self-cleansing system.
It is. And it really, I mean, and it will continue to operate, hopefully, the way that you all want it to operate, because after we're gone, you'll be here. And it's your job then to keep the ship going in the right direction. And I think that y'all are equal to the task. And I do believe that younger people do have a much broader perspective on the fact that they want the things that they do to affect the world in a larger way. And I think that is a meaningful goal. I really do. It's a meaningful goal. We were so much more locally oriented. Yeah. And I'm not sure if we worried as much about how the things that we were doing were impacting everything. We were kind of letting someone else manage that problem. But I think now communication is so free and open that I think that it's important to recognize that you can reach out to people across the world if you want to and deliver a message to them that may change the way they see things. And I think that's going to be y'all's challenge, because right now the world seems to be at a precipice. You have a lot of extreme behavior that seems to be coming in, that is counteracting a lot of the maybe more open and liberal things that also seem to be coming out at the same time. So I think they're due to clash a little bit in some countries. And I think it's going to be challenging in the places where the structure of government isn't as accessible as it is here, to get those countries to expand their consciousness, understand more about human rights, recognize the inalienable need for people to be secure in their persons, because that does not exist in some other places. It really doesn't.
And that's really the foundation.
And we are seeing some of the effects of that in the criminal justice system here. The human trafficking problem, we have to, that has to be addressed. I mean, that just has to be. We should just almost, okay, drug problem, go there. Let's deal with this problem now, because this is becoming a real serious issue for us. I have a lot of friends who are judges on the Fourth Circuit, and they're very much involved in the human trafficking situation in New Orleans, because, I mean, you know, in these certain cities, you have either the availability of people being brought through our ports who are coming in for that particular reason, as opposed to someplace like Iowa, where you're not going to have a lot of influx of individuals who might be in a position where they could be victimized that way. We have people coming in from all over the world all the time here. And a lot of times they come in and they want to stay here, but they end up getting, you know, involved in situations that they can't anticipate. And then next thing you know, they're involved in some sort of trafficking. I mean, it's when I hear these women talking to me and they're telling me these stories, it blows my mind, because it is something that you don't necessarily confront in the suburbs.
You don't see it. Yeah.
No, you really don't.
Is it predominantly women that are
women and children, women and you know, youngsters. I mean, you know, teenagers, young teenagers. I mean, yeah, it's a huge issue.
And what does that mean? Human, it's a term that is utilized so often, but I've never had it really dialed down for me. So what is the legal standing?
I think that there are probably more than one, not standard definition, but more than one category of trafficked individuals. But most of the time, what you're talking about is someone who is being moved from place to place, primarily usually in the sex trade, and they are unable to break free. They're not, because of either
a million reasons. It could be language, it could be lack of papers.
Language, they could be illegal, they could be drug addicted. I mean, there's so many different things. They could be intimidated. I mean, you have people who basically, they're captives.
Yeah.
So they develop that mentality that they can't get away, they can't run away. And so, I mean, you actually have individuals who are really being victimized through violence and through other things. And you have, I mean, and the thought that they can't get away from this lifestyle, they can't walk away, they can't just leave where they are. That's where the trafficking comes from. And of course, then the idea of movement from place to place to keep them rootless, to keep them from developing any associations, relationships outside of what the individuals who are trafficking them have them primarily for, so that they're not able to either come up with a group that could resist, or a plan, to try to get. I mean, these people really do move individuals around city to city, state to state.
In a calculated kind of way.
Yeah, so that they can basically keep them off balance constantly. It's a horrible
What's really
thing.
interesting about hearing, describing the drug issue on one hand
Mm-hmm.
and then human trafficking on the other side, is that to folks that are just kind of wandering the streets of any town USA,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost an invisible problem.
Yes,
Almost entirely invisible. And so
It
we
is.
talk about the opioid epidemic,
right.
but it's not like you just see people lying in the public square
Right.
Overdosing.
Right.
And in the same way you talk about sex trafficking, it's not that you
Right.
see...
No.
It's not like
There's not some guy standing on the corner,
right,
with a girl on a
shotgun.
chain. I mean,
Yeah.
it just doesn't. That doesn't happen here. So
That's
it
gotta
is.
be so incredibly difficult.
It's a
to-
submerged problem, which
Yeah.
is what makes it so difficult to battle. But it's exactly the same. The fundamental problem with drugs and trafficking is exactly the same thing. They are submerged. People are doing them in secret on purpose.
Yes.
Making it much more difficult for the authorities, to basically track down the individuals who are responsible and apprehend and incarcerate them, because those are the people that we really need to focus on, is those individuals. The victims of all of this need help.
Yes.
I mean, they do. They need enormous support. I mean, it's unbelievable. And we're lucky because we have a number of group homes now that are devoted specifically to trafficked individuals that will help women transition from a traffic situation into a normal life, but they need a lot of support.
Yeah.
They need counseling. They need usually training skills. I mean, they need an enormous amount of support in order to be able to make the transition from that, because this is a traumatic experience. I mean, it truly is. So it is not an easy problem to resolve, even when you figure out what's happening, where it's happening, you rescue individuals. Then then you have to do something with them. I mean, you can't just release them back into the wild. I mean, that's not going to work. So it's the same thing with individuals who get caught up in the criminal justice system who are addicted. We can't just let them go. I mean, we have to help them.
There
we
has
have
to be infrastructure.
There does. And all these programs that the criminal justice system and the justice system in general is trying to support are designed to try to remediate those particular problems and to try to reach out in a completely different way, because it used to be crime, punishment, crime, punishment. Well, it doesn't work. That model doesn't work for what we're finding out is happening now. Sure, I guess if a woman was being paid for sex, technically she's committing a crime, correct? But if she's doing it against her will, how can you hold her responsible for that? So that person can't be incarcerated even though she's technically committed a crime, because she's actually a victim too. I mean, she's as much of a victim as anyone else, and maybe more so than anyone else in that situation.
Not really what the legal system was
No. We don't want to punish those people.
You're not going for her. You're going for the person.
Right. We want the
manipulating
person
and
who's we want the person who's gaining economic benefit from that relation. That's the person that I want. I mean, I want the guy who's making the money and who's doing this. Okay, that's who I want. And the victims need to, like I said, they need an enormous amount of support, and they need to be helped away from this program, whatever it is, away from the system, away from what drew them in. But fixing them can be complicated. It really can be.
And it's not what courts were set up to do in a lot of ways.
Well, it really isn't. But we are taking on the responsibility because we feel as though that is something that we're in a unique position to do.
Yes.
Those individuals will come before us in a much higher concentration than they'll go almost anywhere else. So as a result of that, we have the opportunity to get them right at the as they enter.
Because this is where the problem sort of enters the public consciousness.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's through the court system, and through the process of the criminal justice system and how you get drawn into that. And so the good news, though, is that even the sheriffs, the chief of police here, everybody has developed a level of sensitivity to the notion that we know the difference between the bad guys and the victims. Yes. And sometimes inside of criminal conduct are victims. And you have to handle that differently. Those people
Yes.
have to be treated differently. They require a different response. And so the criminal justice system has really kind of matured in that way and become a lot more conscious of the idea that it's not all black and white. It's not all good and bad. It's not all you broke the law or you didn't break the law. This is ginormous gray area now that we're having to deal with, where we actually have people who are involved in criminal conduct who are actual victims. Yeah. And we're trying to respond to that. It's not easy, but we're going to keep doing it.
It's the task.
Yeah.
Man, Your Honor, it's such a pleasure to have you come through.
Well,
today.
thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This was a great opportunity for me to say a few things about my world, okay, and and how we view what we're beginning to see and what we're trying to approach, and
it's in balance. It's everything in balance. A lot of what drove me to entrepreneurship was a lot of my negative reaction to seeing a lot of bureaucracies, seeing it on the ground floor, and from the irony is then, growing a business is I have a much deeper appreciation now for just sort of civic operations, because now you're a part of it. Mm-hmm. And it really doesn't matter where you participate in it, just as long as you're doing your best and you participate as a good actor, right?
Right. No, I agree. And I'll tell you something else, too. I think information is the best thing in the world. Yeah. Okay? The more exposure people get to new ideas and innovations, and the more that they see that we're trying to come up with solutions to really difficult problems, yes. Hopefully the more they'll be supportive.
It's not so simple.
No, it's not so simple. But we're all in this together, okay? I mean, this is the thing. We're a society. And, I think New Orleans is a great example of how easy it is for us to all of a sudden just pull together. Mm-hmm. We do it. We were talking about Mardi Gras a little while ago, okay? And every once in a while, sure, something happens that is tragic and difficult to comprehend, but it happens not because of us coming together in this giant party, but in spite of it. Because most of the time, it goes off without a hitch. And 500,000 people can stand on the same street together and catch beads and chat with each other and, and share ideas and information with someone that they've never seen before, and it's all good. And it works out fine. That happens 97% of the time. So, so I think that that's a win. But it does give you the notion that we are part of a larger group, and we need to recognize each other in this group. And if you're falling down, I can help you. And that's really what I hope that we can do, at least from my point of view.
We appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time out of your day.
It was a pleasure.